Why does it feel like I'm so concerned with Netflix's Avatar The Last Airbender? And why does it seem like so many other people are worried about this show? In this video, we're going to answer that question because I feel like there's a lot of people who still don't understand. So by the end of this video, I want you guys to let me know down below in the comment section if you think it's justified, if you think our worry for this show is justified. Let's get started. Number one, and this is a pretty bad one. They've taken Sozin's Comet out of the entire show. At least for now, Sozin's Comet is not part of Netflix's Avatar The Last Airbender. And their justification is reasonable, but that's literally, dude, that's such a central part of the entire show. That's insane to me. The reasoning here I do understand, but let's read this. All 3 seasons of the animated series essentially take place in the course of a 1-year calendar, Kim says. Albert Kim, the showrunner, right? There's no way we could do that. So we had to design the first season especially to accommodate the possibility of some time elapsing between the first and second season. That's just in the nature of a live action adaptation, right? Because the actors are going to age. Part of the strategy involves Sozin's Comet, which fans of the original series are already familiar with and newbies can spot cutting across the night sky in the trailers. The comet was their ticking clock, Kim explains. We removed that particular ticking clock from our show for now because we couldn't know exactly how old our actors would be for the subsequent seasons. We definitely thought about that going into season 1 so that we can accommodate for puberty, adolescence, time passing, and all those fun things that happen to real life human beings that don't happen to animated characters. So I do understand the reason for why they did it, but that is such a huge change. Taking out Sozin's Comet? Dude, I'm not going to say anything about it because I don't want to spoil the show. Because if they do decide to somehow add it back in, it's just insane to me. That change is massive. Another equally, if not even more massive change is what they're doing to the character of Aang. In this interview with IGN, Albert Kim, the showrunner, revealed some pretty concerning things about the show. In this question, it says, I think one of the big questions is, despite all the remixing, is the point A and the point B still the same as the original? The reason that question even occurred, asking is the point A to point B the same, which it should be because you're telling the same story. The reason why the interviewer is asking that is because previously Albert Kim said Avatar The Last Airbender on Netflix is not a cover, it's a remix. It's not a cover, it's a remix. He said, I've used the term that this is a remix, not a cover, in that you've got to hit a lot of familiar notes, but you can't forget that this is supposed to be a new song. So obviously, there are story points and characters that you have to do fairly faithfully from the original, but at the same time, you're literally translating something from 2D to 3D, and that meant dimensionalizing the story, taking it into new places and filling in some of the gaps. I'm fine with filling in gaps and even taking it to new places, but to call it a completely new song, to say it's a remix and not a cover, that's a huge red flag to me, man. That's a huge red flag, because a remix can sound and feel completely different than the original song. And taking that into account with what the original creators of Avatar The Last Airbender said, that's a huge red flag as well. But let's get on with what he said about Aang. Albert Kim said, so we decided to make Aang's narrative drive a little clearer. In the first season of the animated series, he's kind of going from place to place looking for adventures. He even says, first we've got to go and ride the elephant koi. It's a little looser and befits a cartoon. We needed to make sure that he had the drive from the start, which completely goes against the character of Aang. And so that's a change that we made. We essentially gave him this vision of what's going to happen. And he says, I have to get to the Northern Water Tribe to stop this from happening. That gives him much more narrative compulsion going forward as opposed to let's make a detour and ride the elephant koi type of thing. But here's the thing. What spawned the entire show was the fact that Aang I don't want to spoil it. So cover your ears if you guys haven't seen the show. But what the whole thing that started the show is Aang avoided responsibility. He was scared. He didn't want the responsibility of being the Avatar, which is why he froze himself in the water, right? Which is what led to him freezing himself in the water, right? And that's why he went on all these side adventures, because he still wanted to be a kid. He didn't understand the responsibility of being the Avatar, and he didn't want to understand it. He just didn't want it. He wanted to be a kid. He wanted to have fun. It scared him. This whole new world of war scared him. And the journey of accepting that responsibility, standing up and facing things head on, that was his whole character arc for the entire show. And you're giving him that drive in book 1. He already knows, I have to get to the Northern Water Tribe. That's my that's my goal. That's my focus. They just missed the entire point of Aang. They missed his entire character. All right, now this is from one of the creators of the show, and this is where it ties in to the fact that Albert Kim, the showrunner of the Netflix series, says it's a remix. It's not a cover. It's a new song. Listen to this. They chose to leave the show, and they said, we will have no involvement in the project moving forward. They've distanced themselves from this show. The creator said, Netflix made a very public promise to support our vision. Unfortunately, there was no follow-through on that promise. Mike and I are collaborative people. We did not need all of the ideas to come from us. As long as we felt those ideas were in line with the spirit and integrity of Avatar, we would have happily embraced them. Which means the ideas were not in line with the spirit and integrity of Avatar. However, we ultimately came to the belief that we would not be able to meaningfully guide the direction of the series. So if these ideas are not in line with the spirit of the original show, and that's the reason the creators left, isn't that a huge red flag? That's a huge red flag in my book. If the original creators are not giving a blessing on the show, saying that the ideas aren't in line with the spirit of the original show, and then you have the showrunner of the Netflix series saying that it's a remix and not a cover, it's a new song, and also add in the fact that they're making changes to Aang, that's a huge red flag to me. And I'm sure you've heard by now, Aang is not the only character they're changing. They're changing Sokka. I feel like we took out the element of how sexist Sokka was. I feel like there was a lot of moments in the original show that were iffy. This is coming from the actress who plays Katara. Hearing that, you may think, that's not a big deal. Taking just an element of how sexist Sokka was, taking that out of the show, that's not that big of a deal. The thing is, that element is a byproduct of his entire character arc at the beginning of the show. His entire tribe, right? The men went out to war and battle and did manly stuff, and the women stayed home and took care of the home, right? More traditional, right? The Northern Water Tribe is even more so that way. So his father left to fight, so he's always felt the need to prove himself, to overcompensate in that way. And it's a journey for him. It's a journey of betterment, of maturity. He realizes the way he thought wasn't the right way to think, and he improves. So this is a good thing. It's not like the show is glorifying sexism or something. It's saying this is bad, and this is how we improve. It showed a flawed character, and it showed his growth. So I don't get why they took it out of the show. Ooh, this is another big red flag. They're trying to go after the Game of Thrones audience. Check out this little clip right here first.
For fans, there'll be very familiar images, which will be super exciting. But hopefully for people who haven't seen Avatar before, it should be epic and exciting on its own. And that really speaks to the challenge of adapting a story like Avatar. You've got to appeal to this base of diehard fans that are already out there, but also appeal to a generation of viewers who've never seen the show before.
And to that I say, why? Why is there two different audiences? There's no need for two different audiences. Those who have seen the show and those who haven't seen the show. Like I said in my previous video, once upon a time, nobody knew what Avatar: The Last Airbender was. Yet it was such a cool concept that everybody liked it. You don't need two target audiences. You don't need to grasp the Game of Thrones audience. Listen to this. It also had to appeal to people who were big fans of Game of Thrones, and so it had to feel grounded and mature and adult in that way. So that's, like I said, the tightrope we have to walk. You don't. You don't have to walk. You know how many adults watch Avatar: The Last Airbender? I've been watching reaction videos of people watching the show. They're all adults watching it because it's a cool story. It's an interesting story. The lore is really cool. You don't need to change it. You don't need to attract the Game of Thrones audience. You don't need to attract other audiences. It already has a following of its own, which is why you're creating this live action adaptation. And speaking of lore, check this out.
So here we see Aang going into the Avatar state, which in the world of Avatar is the ultimate power. And so we treated it very seriously. In fact, we actually don't see Aang going into the Avatar state as much in our first season as they did in the animated series, because we wanted to make sure that it felt very special. And we wanted to make it very clear that Aang could only access that state in specific set of circumstances. We actually tweaked the rules a little bit from the original series as to when and how he can access that state. But that's part of doing an adaptation like this. Like, there are certain things that we are going to modify, we're going to change, and hopefully fans will see that it's all for the good of the story as a whole and in dimensionalizing the story and bringing it from one medium to the other.
So Aang's not entering the Avatar state as often. Why? And why change the rules of the Avatar state? Why? Just why? Why are you changing the lore, the rules of what was created? That does not make any sense to me. To make it more like Game of Thrones, they're going to be focusing more on the Fire Nation. They're going to be bouncing back and forth from all the different nations, just like they did in Game of Thrones with all the different families. As a result, we're going to be getting a whole lot more of Azula in this first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender. We're going to be getting Fire Lord Ozai because we're bouncing to all the different nations, so we're going to be seeing people that we never saw in book 1 of the original cartoon. And the reason why that could be a problem is because it's going to take away from, like, when Azula first showed up on the scene in the cartoon, you're like, who is this girl? This girl is insane. You're not going to get that the same way you did in the cartoon because you're going to be seeing her way earlier. You're going to be seeing Fire Lord Ozai. So that mystery, that, like, who is this crazy powerful guy? I don't know much about him. It makes you intrigued. You're not going to get that. I mean, sure, it's going to be real cool seeing more of Fire Lord Ozai. It's going to, because that was awesomely cast. I think that's going to be a real cool part of the show. Seeing more of the Fire Nation, I think that's going to be cool. It might be a cool change, but it is a big difference from the cartoon, so I thought I'd point that out. And lastly, Hollywood has taken franchise after franchise after franchise and just destroyed them, completely misunderstood them. They've done this to Star Wars. They've done this to Jurassic Park. They've done this to Ghostbusters. They've done this to so many superheroes. And we don't want to see this happen to Avatar: The Last Airbender. Obviously, when it comes to an adaptation, changes are going to be made. Especially in this case, you're taking a cartoon and you're translating it to live action. There's changes that are going to be made. We have to be understanding of that. But when you change lore, when you change character, when you change story, that's when we have a problem. Those type of things, you shouldn't be changed. When the very spirit of the story that's being told is changed because you're adapting, that doesn't make any sense. If you're changing the very core of something, might as well go make your own show. Might as well go tell your own story. Why adapt something? And I'm not saying that's what's happening with Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender. We haven't seen it yet. But the red flags are there. And that's why we're worried. So that's pretty much it. I don't want this to be a remix. I want it to be a cover. A cover doesn't have to be perfectly exactly the same. A cover can be different. You can play the same song with different instruments. And it'll be a new experience. A remix can be something completely entirely new. And the thing is, he said this is a new song. And the fact that the OG creators said that the things that they're doing are not in line with the spirit of the original cartoon, that's what worries me. That is what worries me. The changes they're making to Aang, character changes, character arc changes, to character development changes, Aang and Sokka, that's what worries me. Lore changes like when and how Aang enters the Avatar state. The fact that the Sozin's Comet is not even going to play a part. That's what worries me. Now take that all together, and the fact that they want to attract the Game of Thrones audience and put it in the context of a modern Hollywood live action adaptation. And you'll see why people are worried about this show. Who knows? It might be awesome. It might be great. If I had to rate it right now based off what I'm seeing, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10 or put it in the 7s. So I don't think it's going to be horrible. But that doesn't change the fact that there are red flags. It doesn't change the fact that there is a reason to worry, a reason to be concerned. That's Hollywood's track record right now, unfortunately, when it comes to adaptations. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Do you think the worry is justified? Let me know down below, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.